Thank you for joining me. Welcome to today's live stream. And today, the topic is the dark side of the spiritual path, right? Whether you're watching this live or you are watching it as a recording, I welcome you. And I have received several questions, from people who are not able to make it live. They're very interesting questions, and I think some of the questions are coming from people who have personally experienced the dark aspects of the spiritual path, and maybe feeling a little bit lost and needing some clarity. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because this is becoming an increasingly big stumbling block for people on the spiritual path. It has become such a distraction as well. And because it is a distraction, it is not helping spiritual people to grow in the direction that they want to grow. And they have no idea that they're not going in the direction. So it has become almost like an illusion. So they think they're going one way when actually they're not. And then they're being affirmed by their community or by a teacher or a guru that they are going that direction, even though they are not. So it becomes a little bit tricky to address, because if you are someone standing on the outside and you are observing this happening, chances are, people are not going to listen to you because you're on the outside. And groupthink is a very powerful thing, right? Groupthink is so powerful. It supports you negatively or positively, and it will prevent you from moving out of the groupthink. And all of us have, fallen victim to groupthink, and it's a very common phenomenon, not just in the spiritual path. Groupthink exists in all aspects of life, whether it's community, family, culture, race, country, global issues. We all have groupthink, right? So in spirituality and in religion, it just makes it much more tricky, because people have a tendency to give their power away, complete power away, to this groupthink, because people are constantly looking for someone to save them or salvation or something. All right. So what I speak about today when I talk about spiritual path is not just about the New Age movement, but traditional religions, as well as these new religions that are coming up, new traditional religions. So you have these mega churches, you have these mega temples or mega whatever, right? These they have used traditional teachings, old teachings, and they are updating the teachings, but the groupthink dynamic is still very, very powerful. All right, one very good example here that has happened in Singapore is that there was a mega church where there was there's so much corruption when it came to money, and then the head of the church was in prison. But the groupthink is so powerful that even the churchgoers still fervently believe that what the leader of the church did was right, and not able to see beyond, right? The psychological, there was a missing psychological factor going on there. So I'm not here to, talk about them, but this is one good example, all right, about how powerful groupthink can be. So in today's live stream, I'll be covering, let me just give you a breakdown of what I'll be covering, all right? I like to talk about the concept of the dark side of the spiritual path, and what it is, why it happens, and how to recognize it. Common pitfalls, right, such as spiritual bypassing, narcissism, and a holier-than-thou attitude. Right, narcissism is very, very common in the spiritual path. Right, it's shockingly common. Okay, and then we have the dangers of spiritual communities and groupthink, including cults, toxic guru-student relationships. I'll be sharing some personal stories. and strategies for staying grounded, and how to avoid the pitfalls, right? And I'm actually not sure whether we even have time to cover everything. I do have very interesting questions. So if we run out of time, I may do a part 2, or I may do short recordings of the questions. So maybe each recording, which I will post on this YouTube channel, each recording will be a question and then I would answer. So they may not be more than 10 minutes per video if we do not have time, right? That's what I'm going to do, because I really want to address the interesting questions. And the interesting questions really help us to really gather our thoughts and also question ourselves, right? Whether we have fallen into the trap. And then, you know, it helps us to develop some form of critical thinking, which is highly essential at this point in humanity's history in terms of human consciousness and where we are going. We are highly encouraged to develop greater critical thinking and to be very careful about groupthink and not to fall into the trappings. I mean, we have seen this, right, through the pandemic, how powerful groupthink is and how people are pressured. And up to today, I still hear people using groupthink excuses as to why they did what they did. And it's powerful, you know, and psychologically, people give ourselves reasons, right? We always give ourselves excuses and reasons as to why we, of course, they're not going to say like why they fell victim to groupthink, but they say things like, oh, you know, I had no choice, so I had to do this. So the excuse is always, I had no choice, right? So self-empowerment is about knowing that you always have a choice. You made a choice, right? And that was the choice. So, you know, the same thing applies to spirituality, okay? So let's talk about the dark side of the spiritual path. Now, usually when we talk about dark side, people think like, oh, you know, it could be like dark entities or Satanism. These are very obvious, right? Very obvious and almost caricatures, right, of what the dark side is, right? We see them in cartoons, we see them in exaggerated forms on social media, and these are actually not the dangerous aspects of the dark side, because it is in your face. It is very obvious. You see it happening right in front of you, and you know it's very easy to say, okay, I'm not going there because this is dark, right? It's very obvious. Now the true darkness or true dark side is extremely insidious and is usually hidden. It's hidden in the shadow and often disguised as light, often disguised as good intentions. We've heard of the saying, right? All good intentions, the path to darkness is paved with good intentions. So it is exactly that, right? The path of goodness, we think we're walking a path of goodness, but it's always sorry, I'm getting this mixed up. The path to darkness is paved with good intentions. So we may be walking on a path of darkness and we have no idea we're walking on a path of darkness because we think that we come from good intentions. And so one of the most important things, right? Why is it that we have a tendency not to be able to see the dark side is because of our own avoidance of shadow work. That is a big, big factor, all right? And hence, you know, I created this channel because I really want to address shadow work. So this is one big reason why people are not able to see the dark side, because if you're not willing to acknowledge the dark side within yourself, you will not be able to see it in others. And the reason why I'm able to talk about the dark side is because I see the darkness within myself, right? And I work through them. I work with an analyst. I work through them. It's a constant, unwrapping, unfolding, peeling the layers, and knowing, exactly what are the shadow energies that creep up, in my own personal intentions. And I'm not afraid to share this because I know that when we address what's in the shadow and we throw light into it, we become more powerful than the shadow. When we avoid the shadow, this is where the shadow has power over us. Okay, so let me just quickly just browse through my notes again. So one of the most biggest issue, right, is that our unwillingness to address the shadow, or not even realizing the shadow exists. Okay, so let me just share with you some key points as to what are the dark side, right? So the key points would be spiritual bypassing, right? Spiritual bypassing, again, is extremely common, where we go through something and we use a spiritual excuse as to why certain things is happening, and then we just like gloss over the issue and not deal with it, not talk about it, but just give it a spiritual meaning. And this is extremely common in even in religious arena, where people often say, when there is a problem, instead of addressing it, they say, oh, let's pray on it. Let's pray for this. Let's pray for that. Yes, prayers are helpful, but it's not empowering you to do what is needed. It's not empowering you to take action, to do something, because then you're just glossing over. You're not addressing it. All right. And addressing it is so important. Okay. So the spiritual bypassing has caused a lot of people to drop into this illusion that they are spiritually more advanced than they really are. Because they are so afraid of admitting their faults, they kind of put themselves up on the pedestal to say that they are better than everyone else. They have done this, they have achieved certain levels of spiritual activation, they have done this or done that, they are some high level, because they refuse to acknowledge that they have all these darkness looming. And because there's a false belief, and this comes from traditional religion as well, there's a false belief that if you were to acknowledge that you have these things, then you have fallen, right? You are no longer in the light. But that is not true, right? That is, we are all humans. We all have the human experience. We all make mistakes. How can we not have mistakes? How can we not have a dark psychology or dark intentions or strange thinking? You know, it comes from all of our programming, it comes from our trauma, it comes from society, it comes from culture, it comes from, you know, so many things going on. And if we do not address them, they become some sort of a mental illness. And there's so many spiritual teachers out there who are mentally ill, unfortunately, right? Mentally ill. And this includes leaders in traditional religions as well. They're quite mentally ill. But the mental illness is not to the point where you can see it so obviously, and so you're not going to like lock them up in an asylum, right? These are acceptable kind of mental illness because people cannot see the darkness in themselves, so they cannot see it in their spiritual leaders. Okay, and so you know, in a spiritual movement, whether religion or New Age, there's so much of spiritual bypassing that we do not acknowledge, or we do not encourage self-awareness, and we do not encourage or empower people to address underlying problems. People like to gloss over, and the glossing over doesn't help us. You know, like, just take any spiritual text, right? Every spiritual text teach you to be good. And in our innocent, naive, desire to be good, we just constantly try to be good, that when the dark side comes up, we don't want to look at it. We turn our backs on the dark side and we say, okay, you know, I'm pure, I'm good, I'm really this, I'm really that. But then what we turn our back against, right, is just going to build. It's just going to have so much power. And then this energy, right, behind you, the shadow, is just going to manipulate you psychologically because you have no idea what it's doing, right? In order to fight your enemy, you need to know how your enemy operates, right? The dark side is our enemy, and we need to turn around and look at it, look at this demon in its face. It's our inner demon, right? We need to look at it in its face and know exactly what it's up to. And when we can see that in ourselves, it's so easy to recognize it in other people, right? And we can see that in ourselves, we then know how it has manipulated us. We know what is its intentions and what are all the fuck ups it has done, and what it is responsible for in our lives, and all the mistakes we have made. It's really from the shadow. And when we're able to do that, acknowledge and we embrace that, and we go like, oh no, I did that, but I'm not going to judge myself. Okay, that was what happened. I admit it, I take on board. And what you do is, when you embrace it, the powerful light within you that has always been there will then absorb the demon, right? And this is how the light conquers darkness. You have to face the darkness. You can't turn your back. You only turn your back, then it's just going to follow you, but it's not going to be able to be absorbed into your light. To be absorbed into your light, you need to turn around and look at it, right? Of course, what I'm sharing here is an illustration. We literally have to turn around and look at it on a psychological level. We do have to address them. We do have to look at them. We do have to turn everything upside down and look at ourselves like, oh my God, this is what I did. This was my intention. If I was honest with myself, this was my intention, in all my selfishness and in all my vanity and my pride, this was what I did. I was trying to hide away from my own shadow, thinking that I am so brilliant and so light and so loved. But the thing is, the more you try to hide away from the shadow, the more powerful it gets. And this is where the shadow gets bigger and bigger, your light diminishes. But if you're able to turn around and look at it, your light, right, is so bright and powerful, it absorbs. And then the shadow gets smaller and smaller. And then your light becomes who you are, right? So to become spiritual is not, especially in the new age, right? You don't advance through spiritual activations. You advance by looking at your demonic side. All of us have that, right? So, demonic may be a strong word. Looking at your inner demons, right? We all have to look at our own inner demons. Okay. Now, then there is this thing called narcissism. Well, what happens when we are narcissists, we are spiritually narcissistic, is that we have an overemphasis on our personal spiritual growth, and we disregard the needs of others. We see this happening a lot, right? Where in spiritual groups, whether it's a cult or a church or a new age group, where maybe the leader would say, okay, for the sake of humanity, I am going to be the one to ascend, and all of you have to support me in my ascension. And this is super common, right? All of you support me in my ascension. All of you become, and so the excuse that's given is we are a group body. So all of you support me. And so the support can come in so many different ways. The support comes in the form of giving money, right? And they say they're evangelizing, so we need your money. Yes, we need money to evangelize whatever your message or whatever your agenda may be. But if it is a forced kind of donation, a forced kind of, where people are forced to give up, the income to support this community or church or group, right? And while your family may be starving and you are feeding the community, the church, but your family who needs you so badly and you're not feeding them, right? So that is narcissism playing up as well, right? And narcissism also plays up in the sense of superiority. So many spiritual teachers have this, right? My encounter with many of them who decided that I am their enemy. I mean, the number of spiritual people, right, who have this agenda has been countless, because there was a lot of projection on their part, right, projecting their stuff onto me when I asked them, are you working on your stuff? And so when you ask someone, are you working on this stuff? And if they're not, they get really defensive, right? And they start making, social media posts about you, and they're talking terrible things about you. It becomes a personal attack, right? And this happens, okay? This has been a thing, my entire journey as a spiritual teacher, where, people do such things. But to me, I continue to do what I do, because I'm not going to let these things stop me, because it just shows me where exactly I don't want to be. It just shows me that there is so much work that needs to be done. It just shows me that more education is needed in the world. And that includes spiritual teachers who have no idea how they may be spiritual bypassing or allowing narcissism to, that has taken over their consciousness. It's hard to see, that in yourself. You can't see that in yourself, because you don't know what you don't know. How are you going to work on your stuff unless you are working with someone who's going to, right, reflect it back to you and point it out to you, your blind spots. And blind spots, spiritual blind spots, right? It's huge in spiritual movements, including traditional churches, temples, and mosques, and so on, right? It's present everywhere, right? Spiritual blind spots. So narcissism happens, when there is a sense of superiority, the lack of empathy, and doing harm, either whether it is physical harm, psychological harm, or verbal harm, right? And with social media, it's so easy to do these days, right? To harm others, to personalize the attack, and to, like this holier than thou attitude, right? It's just, it's sad, when you see that happening. And spiritual growth, it's about not just our own growth, right? It's about community growth. And if we are the only ones growing spiritually and others are not growing, and we judge them, we put them down, like, why, oh, you're not as advanced as me, you don't have enough light in your aura, you are this, you are that. When we do that, right, what happens is it doesn't benefit us, because in order for spiritual growth to take place in a way that's going to flourish and is going to benefit all of humanity, everyone has to grow, not just one person, not just yourself in a community, right? Everyone has to grow. And I've heard so many spiritual gurus putting their students down and stomping on them, right? Stomping on their self-esteem, stomping on their confidence. Is just, that's like a really holier than thou, narcissistic kind of attitude and mentality. And it really doesn't help anyone. Okay. And holier than thou also creates separation and divisiveness, right? And it doesn't foster unity. And I know I'm so aware that even as I'm talking about this topic, right, it can create separateness, it can create divisiveness, because there'll be people who will not like what I'm saying here, right? And then there is separateness. However, I have to weigh the consequences. What is more important, for me to speak up about what I'm seeing here, what I'm experiencing, and in my journey as a spiritual practitioner and a spiritual teacher, what have I learned? Do I speak out, or do I just keep quiet, right? So I do have to weigh, And at the end of the day, I feel like, okay, I'm going to speak to people who have the eyes to see and the ears to listen. And it's impossible to please everyone, right? And if people are going to take this message that I'm trying to share in the wrong light, I can help that. I can help that. My job really is to share with authenticity that comes from my heart, that comes from my own experience. All right. And that's my ultimate goal. And I'm, as I'm planning for this class, I say, okay, as I'm talking about how important it is to foster unity and connection, at the same time, I know this topic is going to create problems. It's going to create separateness. I know it's ironical, but, I just have to do my best. Then we have this thing called toxic spiritual communities, right? In these spiritual communities, we foster toxic dynamics, and it leads to a lot of abuse and manipulation. And this usually happens when the leader or the guru, or church elder or priest or whatever you want to call them, they come across as they having all the authority and others do not. And only they can dictate the direction you go, right? Which is not the same as guiding someone. When you are guiding someone, you're empowering them. You're telling them, okay, these are the options, right? This is what I have learned. This is my experience. You perhaps would like to take this, my experience on and learn from it. Or there is something else that maybe you would like to do to help yourself, right? So when you have a community that is empowering, that is not going to manipulate you, and you don't have a leader or gurus abusing their power, then you're on the right track. You are with the right guide, so to speak, like a live guide, like a right teacher, okay? So it's very important to question this, all right? Nothing wrong in questioning. Now, if your teacher or your guru or whoever, right, gets angry that you are questioning, that is a red flag. Because you should be questioning, right? Because nothing is fixed in stone, especially in spiritual development. Everything is evolving, it's constantly evolving. And if your teacher or leader is stuck in one type of mindset or one type of philosophy and they're not evolving, you're in big trouble, because then you are stuck with this teacher as well. You're not growing, right? It has to be ever evolving, okay? Now, another thing that is very common is that in toxic spiritual communities, we often have a very charismatic leader, right? Who is a fantastic salesperson, right? Who can sell the concept, and very, very charismatic. And often people follow the charismatic leader. Now, this charismatic leader, if this leader doesn't do their homework and address their shadow side, what's going to happen? The power, the money, the greed, whatever is going to get to their head, and they start to think that they are entitled to all of that. They're entitled to the fame, they're entitled to the money, they're entitled to everything that the community gives them, right? And that is a huge red flag. And that's how, one of the churches in Singapore, that was what happened. Now, the church is still in existence, yeah? People are still going there and they're still doing what they're doing. And, the church leaders, they have served time and all of that. But, beyond that, I don't know. I'm not involved in the church, but they're still in existence, right? So the danger of these sort of organizations is that it creates a cult. So you don't have to call yourself a cult to be a cult. You become a cult by your behavior, isn't it? So cult-like behavior will be extreme devotion and unquestioning loyalty. When you do not question and you are judged for questioning, or let's say, right, I've done this, you know, with a few people I know who belongs to another mega church, and I would question, I said, you know, what's up with this guy? And they get really defensive. Then I know the cult is forming. The cult is really forming, because if the people feel that they need to defend, you know that that's a cult mentality already. And it's not an open, you know, and heart opening and mind opening spiritual community where it allows people to grow on their own terms with guidance from teachers and leaders. Guidance is one thing, it's not set in stone, right? Guidance is given lovingly and unconditionally. The problem now is with many organizations, whether it is, you know, old traditions or new one, the guidance is you're either for me or you're against me, right? And if you don't do as I say, you're out. Okay, and that does not create a healthy growth environment. It's extremely cult-like. Another cult-like behavior is an isolation from outside perspectives, and when you have a different point of view and you ask questions, and especially if you get, okay, this happens quite a bit, right, in the work that I do, right? I'm a life coach, and I do have clients who belong to certain churches and all of that. So when they come to see me, they see me secretly, because they tell me that the reason why they cannot share with their community that they come and see a spiritual life coach is because I am not from their community and that I will contaminate them. But the client, right, knows enough to know that something toxic is going on within the community and they need to seek outside reference. They need someone who's on the outside to give them a clearer psychological perspective of what is really going on. So cult-like behaviors are extremely common, very common in religious organizations, in New Age organizations, and some may even, you know, be highly functional, but still, you know, maybe 5%, 10% of cult-like behavior. It happens. And it's up to the leader to clamp it down, to stop it. And if the leader doesn't address it, it becomes a big problem. Okay, eventually it becomes a big problem. And then there are, you know, another dark side of the spiritual path is when individuals from an organization start to harm themselves. So they harm themselves where they become so emotionally unstable, and the groupthink encourages them to move in that direction because everyone is emotionally unstable. So that is, you know, quite sad, right? And on so many different levels. When critical thinking is not encouraged, and this is where, you know, problem starts. And when you have people judging you for a different way of thinking or different way of operation, even though you belong to that community, and the people around you, your community doesn't support you, the community, you know, starts to stay away from you, then you know there's something not quite right going on within the community. And this is where, you know, you decide that, okay, it is time I leave, right? And of course, you know, we hear stories of so many guru misconduct, right? Leadership misconduct. So these are some of dark sides. So this misconduct could be like, you know, corruption when it comes to money, power, sexual misconduct, right? And manipulating people who are emotionally weaker. Instead of up-leveling them and empowering them, the manipulation goes on for their own gains. And it's okay to be skeptical on the spiritual path. It is okay. And, you know, I mean, don't be such a skeptic that you don't believe everything and anything, that you don't even trust yourself, right? Then that's, you know, the other end of the spectrum. it's okay to be skeptical, because when you are skeptical about a spiritual movement or skeptical about a religious organization, it helps you to develop critical thinking, where you will then do your research, find out more, hear from different people, and then you can make a decision whether this is the thing for you or not, right? So just remember that, the dark side, while is present everywhere, right? We still need to take that leap of faith. If we want to grow spiritually, we cannot allow the dark side to stop us. And obviously, then we allow the dark side to win this game, right? Win this war, so to speak. The idea is to be aware of the dark side, and you take the risk. You take what I call spiritual risk, and you step up and navigate through your spiritual path with the understanding that you will make mistakes. You will be confronted by your own pitfalls. You will be confronted with your own shadow side. You will be confronted with the fact that you may have been as silly as some of the people in the community, where you may have done a whole lot of guru worshipping, or you may have contributed so much money to the community because you were blind then, right? Spiritual blindness. And that's, be open that might happen when you don't have the clarity. The idea is to develop the self-awareness so that when you see it, you move out of it and you be gentle with yourself. Okay? So those are some examples. Now, any questions from people viewing live before I go on? Okay, so some of you may have questions. If you're typing your questions, go ahead. I'd like to talk about some other aspects of the dark side. Is the lack of integration, where we overemphasize the spiritual realm. A lot of people just live in the spiritual realm, and they're not in touch. They're not even functional in the earthly world. They fall sick so often. They're not taking care of themselves properly, and they spiritualize their sickness, and they say, oh, I am taking on the sins of the world. I'm taking on this, and that's why my body is breaking down. So that's, again, a spiritual bypassing, right? Not truly addressing what is it that you have been doing to your body. Are you taking care of yourself properly? Are you, maybe it is ancestral, maybe it is karmic. I mean, so many possibilities as to why our body is breaking down. But what are you doing about it to take care of yourself in a practical way, instead of spiritualizing everything? And this happens more often than people care to admit. Okay, there is too much overemphasizing of the spiritual realm, right? People live in a world where they're just constantly talking about angels and masters, and not in touch with, okay, what can you do, to help your next door neighbor, for example? People say, oh, send them light. Yes, you can send them light, but what else can you do to help your next door neighbor? Can you do something, in a more practical way? Is there anything you can do? Is there, if you can't help, is there someone else who can help them, right? These are practical things. And these are the practical things, how we are functioning as humans in the human world, in the earthly realm, where we are practicing our spirituality. This is spirituality in action. Spirituality is not living in our heads and like, oh, I'm sending light, oh, I'm praying, I'm doing this whole lot of meditation and so on and so forth. And I think one of the biggest joke, okay, maybe a bit mean to call it a joke inverted commas, is when people say, we just did this global meditation, and because of the power of our meditation, we shifted the direction of where the earth is going. I would question that, because I would ask you, where on earth is that thinking coming from? Which egotistical mind planted that thought in you, that you even think that the power of your visualization or your power of your prayer shifted? Like maybe there were 120 of you, and I mean, it may well have done that, but then the fact that you thought that and you verbalize that and you tell the whole world that 120 of your 144 of you did a meditation, you shifted world events. That's egotistical, isn't it? That's just the root cause of many problems to come. That just promotes the idea that all you need to do to help the world is meditate. And then, it's a good excuse not to do anything else. Because you're a spiritual practitioner, then all you do is just meditate and pray. And you find out, okay, my prayers and meditation are more powerful than, physically helping. That is one big problem that we need to look at, right? We need to look at it and say, okay, am I being too woo-woo here? Can I do more? Can I, relate to my fellow brothers and sisters, my fellow human beings in a practical way? What can I do? What can I do to help? Okay, so integration is so important. I hear many stories also of people disregarding their responsibilities, their relationships, their social engagements in favor of spiritual pursuits. While you can be very passionate about your spiritual pursuits, keep in mind that you do not come from a position of spiritual ego, that you are pursuing it. The fact that you are relentlessly pursuing it, above everything else, it can become quite dark. The agenda, you have to question the agenda. Where is that coming from? Are you doing it as a competition? Are you doing it because you have low self-esteem? Are you doing it because everything else in your life is not working out, and this is the one thing that you don't have to be accountable for, and that's why you're leaning towards it? These sort of things we need to question. Nothing wrong in being passionate about your spiritual pursuits, right? Nothing wrong, but the intention, right? Are you running away from something? Now, spiritual communities is one of the places where people often run to when there's too much happening in their world. It's like a safety net, because oftentimes you are being nurtured in a spiritual community. Everybody says, oh, poor thing, come, let me love you. Let me send you lots of love, lots of light. And then you don't have to be responsible for anything. And that's why, people often follow cults or follow groups because it's comfortable. You don't have to live up to your responsibilities. And the excuse that people give is, these are just earthly pursuits. I have no interest in earthly pursuits. My connection is with God and the divine, and I just want to connect with the divine. I can't wait to go home, right? Everybody says that. But then the question is, why did God put you here in the first place? Why did the universe happen in such a way that you're here on this physical world? What is it that you need to do? The fact that we are still here means that there is still unfinished business, right? Things needs to be done. If you can do your spiritual stuff, then why come here? Why be here? You just do the spiritual stuff in the spiritual realm. Why be here? Right? In physical reality. So the lack of integration and failing to see that can cause one's consciousness to be disjointed. It can split. Right? And that's where, even when the person has split their consciousness, they still don't know that it has happened. Because you don't know what you don't know until someone points it out. And then your reaction, you could be reacting like violently to it, right? It's a huge trigger, violently like opposing, like, no, what you say is not true. I am not split, right? So it can happen that way. And there must be a balance. We need to strike a balance between our spiritual growth and our grounded, holistic living. We can be tree huggers. We can be, for the earth, we can be very spiritual in our beliefs, but how do we use our spiritual beliefs and make ourselves functional in the earthly world? All right. So our disconnection from reality can make us lose touch. And we find that we're not able to do simple tasks. We're not able to achieve simple things. We don't know how to set up systems. We don't know how to open a bank account. We don't know how to do practical stuff, right? And there's too much detachment because, you know, in spiritual schools, you're taught to detach from the world, right? But I think maybe there's a huge misunderstanding of what this detachment is all about. The true test of detachment is when you have everything and not be attached to the things you have. That even when you have all these things, all this money, all these resources, you can let them go easily because you're not attached. You're not emotionally attached. You're not mentally attached. For you, it's no problem. I'll give it all away if I need to. I'll give what I have to the next person that needs it more than me. There is no attachment. Now, detachment doesn't mean to give everything away as well and live with nothing, right? And if you live with nothing, then who's suffering? Maybe your family is suffering. So be very careful about that. Make sure that you are taking care of, self-care is important, your family, and then you can share whatever without the attachment. And that's a true test, right, of detachment. So I've talked about shadow work avoidance, right? Why people, you know, they're afraid. So if you just join me and you want to know more about shadow work avoidance, you can go to the first half of this live stream and I'll share. Okay. I have quite a bit more to cover, but let me, before I go on, I'd like to answer a particular question that I find I find that it's good to address it at this point. Okay, so this question is: what are some strategies for maintaining? No, sorry, wrong one. Okay, how can I recognize if I'm engaging in spiritual bypassing? Right, good question. And what steps can I take to address it? The answer is look for patterns of avoiding uncomfortable emotions or personal issues. Right? That's a pattern. Now, we often do spiritual bypassing when we feel pain, we feel hurt, we feel some past trauma, it comes up. And instead of sitting with the discomfort and working through that uncomfortable emotion and horrible traumatic sensation in the solar plexus or in your heart chakra, or that heaviness on your shoulders, or feeling like depressed feelings, right? Instead of doing all that, what we do in spiritual bypassing is like, oh, okay, let me just breathe in the violet flame. Let me just shine light. You know, I want to feel better. We want the instant quick fix and we avoid feeling all of these feelings, and that's spiritual bypassing. Right? We have all done that because we have been taught, right? We have been taught that that is the way to deal with it by churches, by religious organizations, by our spiritual, new age spiritual teachers, right? We plaster things. Nobody tells you that when you are going through these emotions, you need to sit in that discomfort. Maybe nowadays, there are one or two good teachers out there who are teaching this, right? They have even written books about this. Sitting with the discomfort in the body. And if you're not able to do it, you find it very hard, get a therapist or a coach to sit with you, to hold space for you, right? Because you have not learned how to inner parent yourself, and that's why you are not able to sit with the discomfort. So I would refer you to my previous live stream on inner parenting. Go watch that. It is one of the biggest keys to spiritual development. And one of the biggest reasons why people have fallen into the trap of the dark side of the spiritual path is the lack of inner parenting. They don't know how to inner parent. So watch that video. Okay, I have all the resources in this channel to help people grow, right? All the information is there. Just watch the video. All you need to do is watch the video, take notes, practice what I've been teaching, okay? Or what I've been sharing, rather. Because everything that I'm sharing here, they come from my own personal experience through a lot of a lot of heartache, a lot of difficulties, a lot of like banging my head on the wall, right? Some of you, you know, have done the same thing and realizing like, oh my God, what have I been doing, right? For the first 10 years of my spiritual journey, I thought I was moving somewhere. I wasn't. I was just like a hamster, right? Led astray, left, right, center, thinking that, oh, this is it. This is where I can get answers, and then go that way and this way until life hits you and you don't have a choice but really look at things right in your face, and you have to confront the shadow and the dark side, right? So, and again, right? Life gives us lessons that we all need to learn. And so, spiritual bypassing is so easy to do. I challenge you to ask yourself this question. If you have a deep trauma that you got as a child or as a teenager, or you had some trauma along the way in your 20s, your 30s, or whatever age, and if you can heal that trauma through one session with some guru or healer or teacher, right? If it's gone completely, just one session, I challenge you to question the authenticity of that healing. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And more often than not, it is a long process. We often think that, oh, you know, just do, you know, how many sessions? Okay, maybe 5 sessions, you know, I'll resolve my issues. It's lifelong, right? Lifelong journey of learning and processing and understanding and looking at our own psychology like, oh man, you know, what was I thinking? You know, what is my mode of operation there? Where did that come from? What is that voice? Oh, you know, I was just trying to spiritual bypass. I'm just trying to minimize my pain. I'm not looking at it. Or I'm being over dramatic in my pain, right? We could go either way. We can minimize or we can maximize because they feel easier. The middle way is harder because middle way requires us to be very patient as we sit with the pain and be quiet. That's tough. Minimize, you just climb it down and say, okay, you know, violet flame, lots of light, pray, and it's gone, right? But it's not really gone. They will never be gone until you address it, because they will find a way to manifest itself, and it usually manifests itself as a disease in the physical body, right? Or if we maximize, we're so dramatic about our things, right? Every time we meet someone, we are constantly just talking and talking and talking about our problems, the same thing over and over and over again. You lose all your friends. Nobody wants to be near you because it's tiring. You are emotionally draining to be around. And then you say, oh, all my friends are non-supportive. They're not spiritual. Let me go look for spiritual people. And then when you go into a spiritual community, what happens is they help you to build this drama. They help you to minimize, they help you to maximize. You go like this, right? So you have to question, what are people doing to really help me? Are people being honest? Now, the friend that you have, that you friend or relative of someone who said something to you and you label it as toxic, and you say, okay, I'm not talking to this person anymore because this person said this and this is this about me. I challenge you again to look at it again. Maybe this person was telling you the truth. I'm not saying everyone who did that, you know, is telling you the truth. There's a chance that a person may have, you know, spoken the truth and you didn't like it. The ego just refuses to acknowledge it. Just like, no, I'm not that way. I am so spiritually advanced. No, I'm not what this person said. Or I'm healed. You know, how can this person say I'm not healed? So look at it, maybe that friend did you a huge favor and you did not take it up. Truth can hurt. Truth is painful to listen to, but sometimes we need that pain in order to grow, right? I mean, this cliche, right? The caterpillar in the cocoon, painful to be in a cocoon, struggling out of the cocoon to become a butterfly. Most people don't want to sit in the cocoon. So painful. They just want to go from A to Z in an instant, like snap the fingers. I want miraculous healing, from deep pain and trauma. I just want to suddenly be the light and, like floating and be happy. And I no longer want the depression. I decide that today onwards, I'm not going to allow trauma to be my story. I'm going to change my story. I'm just going to be happy. Too many of this going on. I see on social media. But it's a journey. You can't go from A to Z. It's not going to happen. Because you are going to live in a pretend world, a fantasy world, an illusion, and you're going to spiritual bypass everything. And that issue that you have not resolved is still going to be there until one day you have no choice but to address it because it has manifested as a disease in the body. It becomes a sickness. You have no choice but to slow down and address the disease. Right? So how do you know whether it's spiritual bypassing? Ask yourself whether you quash the horrible feelings too quickly, or you are defensive. When someone says something, are you defensive? If you're defensive, it means you're bypassing. You just want to sweep it away. Okay? I had a life coach who said that if I stay in the present, don't revisit the past or worry about the future, I'll be fine. Well, there is wisdom in staying in the present. There is wisdom. But I feel that there are more things, right, to address. When you stay in the present, there is a lot of wisdom in staying in the present because it helps you to develop awareness, self-awareness. But the problem is we often like to choose this or that. Maybe it's everything that we need to do. Maybe it's staying in the present. Maybe it's revisiting the past. And maybe it's about planning the future. We have to do everything, right? And staying in the present has a lot of value, certainly has a lot of value. And revisiting the past definitely also has a lot of value. So I would encourage you to do all of the above, yeah, to really do all the trauma or whatever the past, right, may have hurt you, that needs to be addressed. But we do it in a way that is responsible. We do it in a way that we're not dwelling in it and overdoing it. So I often teach this to my clients, and this is maybe something that all of you want to do. When you're living in the present, right, very aware of what's going on, but that you have past trauma that you need to address, and if you want to spend time to sit with that pain that's still in the body, right, set a timer, right? I give homework to my clients and I say, okay, your homework is to sit with this particular traumatic emotion, but you set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes, depending, right, on where they are in their growth, and sit with that, set the timer. And if you first sit, nothing comes up, fine. When a timer goes, you just carry on with your day, try again the next day. So the next day, maybe you sit and the emotions, right, overwhelming, they start coming up, and you feel that, right, you allow it, you hold space, and you feel it's too much, but still sit with it. And the timer goes, and then you say, okay, I will stop right here. I don't think I'm able to go more. I don't think I should go more, even if I feel ready. But, let me go one step at a time. Then you feel like you're back in, because you're giving it a structure. You feel much more in control instead of allowing it to take you off course. Because if you don't follow the timer and this thing becomes overwhelming, you can go off, and that can cause, can set you back as well. So I often tell people, if your trauma is very, very deep, the pain is huge, right? It's better to work with a therapist or someone, right, who's familiar with this sort of work. And when you work with someone, they can supervise you, right? They can guide you. And you know that there is a structure there and there's something to hold the space for you. And then it becomes much more manageable. All right. And then as you're healing, then you find that living in the present becomes easier, and planning for the future also becomes much easier. Okay. So I would say do all of the above. Okay. So do I have time? Okay. I have time to answer maybe. Okay. I think I need to do part 2. Looking at my notes here, I still have a lot that I need to cover. And 1 hour of this is really not enough, right? So I will watch out for my email. Okay, watch out for my email. Those of you not on my mailing list, you can always subscribe to my list. You can see the details. It's Shamala Tan .info. All right, you can just subscribe to my email by downloading something, like a meditation, a freebie from my website. Then you'll be on my mailing list, and then you will know when the next live class is. I feel I really need to do part 2. It's possibly not next week, because next week would be this preparation for my daughter's graduation. So it will be the week after, possibly. Okay, I like to do part 2. But in the meantime, I will be putting up short videos on some of the questions that I receive, some of the things, like how do we avoid falling the trap of holier than thou attitude, or what are some of the red flags, how to strike a balance, right? So all these things I like to address. So they'll be in short videos. So if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, do subscribe so that you will, receive notification whenever I put a new video up. And I appreciate you joining me in this live. Wonderful to see more and more people are coming on live. I think my first live stream I had maybe 1 or 2 people. So now we have, many more. But I hope many more others will come in, and we can share in this community on how to grow, right, spiritually. And I wish you the best. And if you have any questions, you can always drop me an email, and I will address the question in the next video that I do, or in the next live stream. Right? I'll be very happy to address these questions. If it is a personal question and you maybe for whatever reason you don't want to do a session with me, a one-on-one session with me, I will use that question as a general question. I will not name names. I will use that as a general question to create a video and make it like an educational moment for everyone, right? But if you feel you want to work with someone, you can always, book a session with me as well. So I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful season. We are entering a fantastic season. Everyone is going to thrive really, really well because Jupiter has come into Taurus, if I'm not wrong, right? I'm not good in astrology, but this is what I learned and what I read. And so this is a wonderful season to really thrive. And so make use of the energies that are surrounding us now to grow, to do better in all aspects of our lives. Okay. So I wish you the best. God bless and namaste. And I will see you again very, very soon.